Executioners usually carry the burden of their job with them. However, we take a look at 3 of them who actually enjoyed their job and performed it without hesitation. From a man who would use horses to tear apart a person, to a man who watched his prisoners struggle on the noose for over 10 minutes at a time, we take a look at some of the most horrifying executioners that lived. Giovanni, also known as the Master of Justice, was the Pope's longest-serving executioner and one of the most celebrated. During his time, he was a known celebrity among people, so famous that Charles Dickens wrote a recollection of him after watching him work one afternoon in 1845. He became so famous because he worked as an executioner for such a long time. His first job was in 1796 and his last in 1861, a span of 65 years. He left a meticulous journal noting down the name of the condemned, the date, the nature of the crime, and where the execution took place. Most of the condemned were convicted by civil courts as murderers. Giovanni usually used 2 types of execution, the axe or the noose. However, in certain circumstances, he would use 2 other methods. The first was the use of a large mallet. He would swing it through the air to gather momentum and then crash it down onto the prisoner's head. He would then slice the throat to make sure the person was killed. The second method was even more gruesome. He would tie 4 horses, 2 to the arms of the prisoner and 2 to the legs of the prisoner. The horses would then be spurred and they would run in a different direction, and each limb would come off the body, and the person would bleed to death. After 1816, however, the guillotine became the most used instrument in executing prisoners. He was also known to give a bit of snuff to the prisoners before they were executed. He was a happy-go-fellow. Without hesitation, he performed his job. The Pope at the time gave him lodgings and money, but he also worked as an umbrella painter to support his wife. He was also known to be pious, conscientious mask-goer. He died at the age of 90. His blood-stained clothes, axes, and even the guillotine he used can be found at the Museum of Criminology at Via del Gonfalone. Tom was a celebrity in New Zealand in the 19th century. Interestingly, though he was the government's hangman, he himself was a criminal with convictions in over 200 incidents, mostly for drunkenness and disorderly behavior. He said he started killing in the Indian Army, but his first execution was in 1877. He hanged William Woodgate, who was found guilty of the murder of his niece, who was only 14 years old at the time. Though a celebrity, Long was not liked by many locals, mainly because he was said to take pleasure in his executions. In one incident, he said to the prisoner about to be hanged, "Goodbye, old fellow. I wish you a pleasant journey. You're only going a few days before us. Perhaps I might follow you tomorrow, or the next day myself." He's most famous for the Minnie Dean case, who had been convicted of killing a baby named Dorothy. At the time, though there was a common sense of disgust at her crimes, many were against hanging a woman. In fact, she was the only woman ever executed in New Zealand. After Tom had executed Dean, he was bragging about it to a football team on a train. The footballers got upset and tried to hang Tom on a hat rack using a belt, but was rescued by the conductor of the train. This was not the first time the executioner was about to be hanged. In fact, he was saved by the public in many occasions. In 1908, he died while bushfelling when a tree fell on him. Though it was deemed an accident, many at the time believed that it was a planned death and that the tree was deliberately cut. In 1721, the ship La Narede arrived in Biloxi with Lewis and his wife and 292 other African slaves. Lewis was separated from his wife and was forced to work a trade job since he knew how to read and write. In 1725, he was offered a job as an executioner. Before he accepted, he demanded that he be freed along with his wife and that he be given a full ration of wine, compensation for his services, and a piece of land on the outskirts of New Orleans. The Attorney General at the time accepted the terms except for freeing his wife. However, she was allowed to live with him. Flogging earned him 10 pounds, while hanging was worth 30 pounds, and he was compensated 40 pounds for breaking someone on the wheel or for burning someone alive. With the acceptance of the job, Lewis was given exclusive authority to execute punishments, not only to other Africans, but also to white settlers as well. He quickly became very famous for having been a slave before, but now an executioner. The job was not without problems. On multiple occasions, people broke into his house to beat him up, and other times, they ambushed him. A special occasion was when 2 black slaves ambushed him, and he went to the general attorney with his concerns and fear for his life. The attorney granted him power to impose capital punishment on his attackers. Once he identified who ambushed him, he brought the attacker to the scaffold. Lewis then put a rope around the attacker's neck and pushed him off the ladder. He watched him struggle for 10 minutes before his body went limp. His body was left on the rope for 10 days to warn others of the punishment that awaited them if they came up against Lewis. He served as the sole executioner for 12 years. He hanged European immigrants convicted of murder and placed countless Africans on the wheel for theft and other petty crimes. The wheel was one of his most notorious ways of killing someone. He would tie them up on a wheel and break every limb and bone in a person's body using a rusted iron bar. It is unclear whether he retired or met an untimely fate, and the official number of executions he carried out is not known. However, it is estimated to be in the thousands. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Please subscribe for more content.